the anomaly. While on the one hand, we've made enormous strides here in North America, the UK, the EU, Israel, Iceland, 77 countries around the world criminalize homosexuality through draconian penal codes and new anti-homosexuality legislation. When I look down at this, capping our Twin Peaks, there is an obscene and pervasive parallel across the decades that we cannot ignore. 81 years ago, on May 6, 1933, the Nazis ransacked and closed the Institute for Sexual Science in Berlin, destroying records and research that impacted homosexuality. And just this year, the Ugandan authorities ransacked Makerere University's HIV Walter Reed project, leading to its closure. In 1934, a special division of the Gestapo was instituted to compile lists of gays and lesbians. In 2012, the Ugandan Minister of Ethics, Simon Lokodo, raided workshops detaining LGBT people and preparing his lists of individuals and organizations. In 1936, Himmler created the Reich Central Office for the combating of homosexuality. In February 2014, President Museveni of Uganda assented to the Anti-Homosexuality Act to combat homosexuality, with prison terms 14 years to life in prison. And the list goes on. Back in the 1930s, this was so-called purifying, and this is how it began in Nazi Germany. And now in 2012, on our watch, we are riding the crest of a wave with similar potential. It all starts with myths and lies and scapegoating serving to underpin the notion of extermination, which means getting rid of, whether that's by so-called curing homosexuality or just letting the general populace attack people by so-called mob justice or even prison. It's all getting rid of homosexuality. After the Ugandan Act was signed, Red Pepper magazine outed 200 of Uganda's top homos, sending hundreds of people hiding. These people were banished, excommunicated, evicted, fired, beaten, threatened with mob justice overnight. Now I have a question for all of you. Imagine if Anne Frank had access to the internet. Imagine if we, as a Jewish population, invited Anne Frank to San Francisco to attend a Jewish festival. And imagine if the State Department said, no, we're not going to give you a visa to come to the Pink Triangle installation because we're afraid you're not going to go back home. This is what happened this week here at Pride. Our State Department denied the people we had invited from Africa to come march with us in Pride visas to come march with us because they were afraid they would go home to the countries that persecute them.
Boo.
If you speak to the State Department, they will tell you they were following the law, and indeed they were. It is much more complicated than I have time for here. However, I want to assert that the way our asylum and refugee laws work, there is no path here for Anne Frank. There's no path here for our LGBT brothers and sisters in Africa. Only a few of the privileged may trickle in. I look down at the magnificence of this symbol and how we have managed 75 years later to reverse its meaning, to symbolize pride, and with events like this to ensure we will never forget. My mind could easily be tricked into thinking we have won. But for as long as we have hundreds of Anne Franks in dark rooms across Africa, we have not won. We have only just begun. And in quick conclusion, my great-grandfather was turned away at Ellis Island, and it was thanks to a philanthropist that saved my Granny Rose, who landed in a Jewish orphanage in South Africa. And that is why I'm standing here today. It was thanks to extraordinary times when people pull out extraordinary measures. As we are going to let the annihilation of Africa's LGBT community happen on our watch?
No.
This symbol will not allow us to forget. But what good is it if we ignore? Thank you very much.
Thank you.